Thanks for stopping by. This MBRR Media. This is another drive time dialectic, and I hope that you guys are all looking forward to a conversation. I haven't done a live stream. Well, I did a live stream the other day. Actually, gosh, I haven't. It's been a couple weeks since I've done a live stream. I've been busier than I'll get out working on a ton of different stories, so yeah, it's wait for everybody to tune in. But let's say hi in the chat. Let me know who you are and where you're watching from. Hit the like on your way in. But want to give a big shout out to all the channel members, but especially to the people at the show producer level. You got Angry Vet from YouTube, we've got IMAT from over at Subscribestar, I've got my Anonymous, who has just continued to do a massive amount of work to help out with what we got going on the channel. And there's, I don't, it's hard to it's hard to explain just how much the channel memberships mean. It's hard to explain just how much it means to have people coming in at the show producer level. It's amazing to think that, you know, little old me starting this show, this platform a little over 5 years ago now, that there are people out there that are willing to interact, pay attention, listen, and I'm thankful for that. For those of you that, you know me, or maybe those that don't. Some of you who know me don't know this, but I gave up a lot for this show, for this podcast, for my content. I gave up a good career that paid me well, and to some degree I'm thankful. Hello, Alice. Thanks for stopping by. To some degree, I'm thankful for what I went through, because it allows me to do content like what we're going to talk about today. And what I mean by that is there's a reality in which we exist that we will stay in comfort zones, we'll stay in places of familiarity and ease, and yeah, happy birthday. But we'll stay in places of ease and comfort, and sometimes it takes a lot to snap us out of that. And when I entered into the law enforcement career field, you know, admittedly working on the detention end of a sheriff's office, but still a deputy, still working in, you know, what a lot of people would consider a dangerous environment, the scales began to fall off my eyes relatively fast. And I began to realize that there was a lot of work that needed to be done in the way of reform in law enforcement. There was a lot of work that wasn't being done to bring law enforcement into compliance with their oaths, with their duties. And so as the law enforcement world turned against me for my content starting in 2020, and government came against me for my content and starting in 2020 and ramped up into 2021, into 2022. I began to realize that the ideology of being a patriot, the ideology of being a person who loves their country, who swore an oath to the Constitution, both in the military and in the law enforcement realm, there's so much more to it than just saying I'm law and order and I support law enforcement. And that ability allowed me, or having that happen allowed me the ability to begin to break out of the mold. And it's cost me, friendships, relationships, communication with family. But it's also allowed me to speak truth to what is going on in law enforcement today. And the fact that, contrary to what you would think would be prevailing wisdom, that things like body cams and social media and the availability of instantaneous data dispersal, that law enforcement would become more and more and more transparent, and that they would begin to make decisions in a more public-oriented way, where they realize that they are going to be scrutinized in ways that they've never been before, and that's good. I hear the complaint all the time that you guys, you can't scrutinize law enforcement the way that you do, because when you do that, you're second guessing people that have to make decisions in split seconds. And this is where we're going to turn this conversation to what I'm talking about here, and why this is an important conversation today. Yes, law enforcement officers do have to be cops, deputies, agents, whatever. They do have to make split-second decisions. No arguments there. It's absolutely 100% true. It is a pervasive problem that law enforcement does have to make split-second decisions. But by and large, it's not the split-second decisions that are getting them in trouble. As critical as I am, split-second decisions are not the place where I tend to err on the side of being what we're talking about today in this drive time dialectic, where you don't have to make a split-second decision, where you have the ability to step back and use some strategy, use some common sense, use some tactical thinking, use some wisdom from others, and say, what's the best thing to do in this situation? And very often, that's not what happens, because cops have become enamored of the comfort that they have in being protected by their badge, being protected by their agencies, being protected by the hero worship that exists in the law enforcement world. So, news broke just a few days ago that a small town in a county in Minnesota, Stearns County, the small town of Payneesville, had a law enforcement officer involved shooting, and that the subject in this situation was deceased. Now, that was June 3rd. Today is June 6th. I want everybody to think about this. June 3rd, there was a shooting in Payneesville involving officers. For lack of better terminology, the medical examiner just released, I think it was yesterday, the announcement that the subject died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Even though he had been shot by law enforcement the subject did die of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now, the subject in question is an 80-year-old man named Larry Allstat. And now, Larry is a former Minnesota State Patrol trooper. So, to me, they maybe didn't have the opportunity. We don't know whether or not they knew that when they arrived at the house. What we do know is that what led law enforcement to that home was that Larry's wife placed a call saying that Larry had assaulted her. That this was a case of intimate partner, if you will. Now, by the time law enforcement arrived on scene, Larry's wife was safely out of the house. She had escaped, if you will. She had gotten out of the home. Now, strangely enough, in Payneesville, the first people on scene were Stearns County deputies and one officer from a city about 20 miles away called Cold Springs. Now, this Cold Springs officer and these deputies were the first the Stearns County deputies were the first on scene. But we do know now that Paynesville Police Department and their chief did show up and were on scene. Now, when the Stearns County deputies, and this is all information I'm getting from people who have talked to people inside the agencies. This is very important. In fact, the Paynesville Police Chief, Chief Wegner, released a statement saying that officers arrived on scene and basically approached the subject, and shots were fired, and the subject is deceased. This was immediately following the incident. And this raised a lot of questions even then. That if they knew, because they said he was in the basement, if they knew that this subject was in the basement, if they knew that the subject was locked away, why did they get to a point that they had to engage with him immediately and exchange fire with him? Now, subsequent to those questions arising, even more questions have now come out, and part of me is questioning, how can they have already addressed and confirmed that it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound? Now, I think we can probably draw some conclusion as to why they would know that. Maybe. In the matter of June 3rd to June 5th, so basically, let's just call it 2 days. Because we know the autopsy and the crime scene breakdown did not take place all on June 3rd. So a lot of it, and I'm not on my phone. I am completely hands-free. I can, it's like having a phone call there, Louie. And I don't care what's legal or illegal in the state of California, quite frankly. So law enforcement can move into a situation pretty quickly. And actually, Louie, why don't you call the Minnesota State Patrol and tell them right now what I'm doing? I am 4 miles north of the city of Stewartville on Highway 63 heading south. Go ahead and call the Minnesota State Patrol. Please do, and tell them to come pull me over. I would welcome you doing that, Louie. I would welcome that. Minnesota State Patrol, I'm sure you can find a number. Minnesota State Patrol, call them and tell them that you know that there is a guy driving a blue Hyundai south on Highway 63. He's now about 3.5 miles from the city of Stewartville. There. I would love to have that conversation on video with you watching, because it's not going to go the way that you think, Louie. Gotcha. So anyway, there's no way that they were able to go in, do a crime scene investigation. There was no way that they were able to go in and do an autopsy, all and have it be so completely conclusive that this was absolutely 100% a case of self-inflicted gunshot. Now, we do know that all of the officers involved were put on paid administrative leave, but now we have Sergeant Paul Orvis, I think it is. Nothing's going to happen if I get caught. But nice try. And it's not dangerous. I drive better. I drive better talking on the phone like this than most people do without any distractions. And this is 10 times more distracting than talking. But I'm ignoring you now. We do know that the sergeant's been placed on critical incident leave because of the shooting, and the Stearns County attorney has admitted, or not admitted, but stated very publicly. I just drove by an Olmsted County deputy, so but the Stearns County attorney has stated publicly that they are investigating Orvis and making criminal charging decisions. Now, that's an interesting development in and of itself, for them to bring that up, that they are investigating him and they are considering, whether or not there should be criminal charges. Now, the questions that I'm going to ask are pretty foundational. What was established very early on was that the wife was able to escape the situation and make her call. Law enforcement arrived within a very short period of time. The wife stated very clearly, this is now public information, the wife, who is the reported victim, the alleged victim, by the way, the poor individual involved, Larry, has every right to be assumed innocent in this situation. He's every right to be assumed innocent. And what I've seen from people by way of public comments is that they're flat out saying, good, another wife beater has been deleted. Good, another domestic abuser has been deleted. And that really chaps my hide, because women do very often make false claims. I don't know how to emphasize this. There are many people out there that make false claims about intimate partner violence. Now, allegedly, they did see evidence that she did suffer some sort of physical violence, and that that's unfortunate. I despise physical violence in families. I cannot stand physical violence in general, but I definitely cannot stand domestic violence. It's a terrible, terrible thing. It should not be happening. But the pivotal part in this is that officers were able to ascertain that the wife was safe, that Paul was in the house by himself, and that he was in the basement on his own. At that point, there was no exigent circumstance that would compel them to enter that home and engage with Paul. Should he be investigated for domestic assault? Absolutely, he should be engaging in domestic, or they should be engaging in the investigation. They absolutely can. But in the moment, was there an exigent reason in place? Were there exigent circumstances in place that would require them to make entry into a volatile situation and attempt to engage with this individual? Could they not have spent, should we say, a larger amount of time, a longer period of time engaging with him, or waiting to engage with him until he had had some time to calm down? I would say yes. The wife was safe. There was no reason for them at all. There again, I'm not defending Larry if he is actually guilty of domestic abuse. Gray Wolf, we can have a conversation about Tim Walz sometime. Maybe I should do a stream about that. But the reality here is that there was no need to rush. So either this was, this is that split second thing that we talk about all the time. There was no need for them to make a split second decision in this situation. And not only that, they called him to the foot of the stairs. He responded. He came out to talk to them. They stated they observed that he had a firearm, but no one has stated that he ever threatened them with the firearm, but that they opened fire because of the presence of a firearm. Now, folks, when you are in your home, when you are in your castle, I don't care who comes through that door. I have a right, a natural right, not a man-granted privilege. I have a natural right to have on my person, in my home, really anywhere, I have a right to have on my person a firearm. Now, there are states that say you don't. There are states that say you do, but I don't care. I have a natural right to have a firearm on my person, in my possession, in my home. Do I deserve to be gunned down? And it is stated that there were several shots fired by law enforcement on the scene. Do I have a right to have a firearm on my person in my home and not fear being shot by law enforcement when they have no exigent, compelling reason to come into that home to take me down? They could have removed the wife. They could have set up a perimeter. They could have gone to a judge, got a warrant based on the probable cause of the domestic assault, and effected an arrest in a way that was safer for everyone. This moment, this split-second decision actually wrongfully endangered the lives of the officers when it wasn't necessary. And they never stated they went in there to save Larry's life. They said that they went in there to arrest him. Now, there again, if he did what he's accused of doing, he should be arrested. He should be charged. He should have had his day in court. But where was the mind of the Stearns County Sheriff's Office? Where was the mind of the single officer from Cold Springs, Minnesota, 20 miles away? Where was his mind? And why on earth did they feel the need to go in and run the risk of being shot when they could have taken a far more tactical and even critical incident position and worked on negotiating to get him out of the house? About law enforcement veterans, this Sergeant Orvis has a 27-year career chances are in that 27 years, he knew, he worked or met Paul, this retired 80-year-old Minnesota State Trooper. It's very likely that he knew this trooper, this retired trooper. You have a deputy to a trooper. Like they could have worked through this situation using that connection of law enforcement to law enforcement, talking blue line brother to blue line brother. Now, who knows? Maybe Paul decided he wanted to enter into this and decided he was going out with self-deletion by cop. Could be the case. We don't know if he was having a mental health crisis. People have, and this is what really blows me away. Excuse the bad pun. This is what really blows me away. So many of the people that are defending the actions of this cop from 20 miles away in the Stearns County Sheriff's Office are saying he's a wife beater, and he's probably been beating his wife for decades. He deserved what he got. Because, and I'm not kidding you, they flat out said he deserved what he got because cops are all wife beaters. So they're defending the cops that shot him, saying he deserved to be shot because he was a cop that was probably a wife beater. So the Back the Blue people are literally screaming that leave the cops alone. They took out a cop wife beater because cops are wife beaters. I don't know how you can make that make sense. You're admitting in your own mind that you know that law enforcement does have a higher than average rate of domestic abuse in their ranks. It's 100% true. Law enforcement as a career field has a higher per capita amount of domestic. You admit that. You admit that cops have a higher rate of domestic abuse as you defend the cops for shooting a cop for domestic abuse. And I also want people once again to understand. Incident takes place on June 3rd. By June 5th, they have determined that it was justified, that it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but the county attorney is saying that they will be conducting an investigation to determine whether or not Sergeant Orvis, with 27 years of experience, should be charged criminally. Folks, this all stinks. This is the state of law enforcement in the United States today. If this isn't just a one-off in Minnesota, in Stearns County, this isn't just a every once in a while something bad happens situation. Folks, this goes on all the time. Tune in to the Civil Rights Attorney. Tune in to hear Brian from High Impact Flicks. Here's the Deal is a YouTube channel. Tune in to Lackluster. Tune in to Audit the Audit. There are so many channels that are not just like out there. They themselves aren't out like having the interactions with law enforcement. They're highlighting story after story after story after story after story of cops making split-second decisions when they don't need to make split-second decisions, and pointing out how those split-second decisions that are made in an unnecessary way are leading to a massive amount of abuse and of power, excessive use of force, unjustified use of lethal force, and over and over and over again. Folks, I don't want a single cop to die in the line of duty. My brother is a cop. I do not want him to be shot and killed in the line of duty. But I also don't want cops to kill people in the line of duty when there are ways to avoid it. And this was a completely avoidable situation. What took place in Payneesville on June 3rd, at the hands of the Stearns County Sheriff's Office, at the hands of an officer from Cold Springs, and this is what floors me, not one officer from the Payneesville PD was in that home when the shooting took place. Not one. The chief has said that. The chief has told people that none of his men, none of his staff were in the home. It was their fucking jurisdiction. It was their jurisdiction. The Payneesville PD had jurisdiction in this situation. They could have stepped in and maybe made a better decision. But nope, Stearns County and Cold Springs from 20 miles away were the first on scene and the first inside. They shot the guy. They've admitted that there was a shooting, that law enforcement shot Larry. They admitted it. Because he had a gun in his house. They didn't even need to be in his house. There was no justifiable reason for them to be in Larry's house. Yes, they had an investigation to do. Yes, could have conducted that investigation in any number of other ways than to go into that house ostensibly guns ablazing. They could have given Larry time to settle down. They could have made an attempt to talk to him on the phone. They could have made an attempt to talk to him through the protection of a megaphone or something. They put themselves in harm's way for no reason. And thank the good Lord that not one of them got injured. We pay cops entirely too well to not make better decisions. And you can rest assured that if there's any way that they are going to be able to justify, even if they find that Orvis discharged his weapon in a moment that it was unnecessary, they're going to find a way to not charge him with this crime. They're going to find a way. Because that's what law enforcement does. That's what county attorneys do. County attorneys, especially in rural Minnesota counties and other counties across the United States, they will look for ways to justify not charging the cops. On one hand, they will come up with every reason under the sun to charge you and I with the crime. On the other hand, they will do everything in their power to find a way to excuse a cop from being charged. We're dealing with this right now. In Minnesota. In the case of Trooper Ryan Moser, in the case of Trooper Shane Roper. Trooper Shane Roper last May mows down Olivia Flores in Rochester, Minnesota, killing her weeks before her high school graduation. And now he doesn't go to trial until March of next year. 2 months ago almost, it'll be 2 months on Monday, Trooper Ryan Moser, responding to a wrong-way driver, mows down Blake Mostad, paralyzing him from the neck down. It's 2 months. 2 months since Trooper Moser paralyzed Blake Mostad. And we're still waiting for a conclusion of the investigation. And there is some news breaking on that. I'm just waiting on some confirmation from outside sources. I have some friends that are working on digging up information on Moser. And we found some things on Moser, and now it appears that there might be some breaking news about the investigation. But the investigation is nowhere near done, and it's 2 months. And why do they do that? Why? It's all to come up with a way to make a defensible position for cops every single time. Because cops get something that we are all entitled to, which is benefit of the doubt. Cops always get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the justice system. You and I, we don't. We don't get the benefit of the doubt. People automatically want to, give cops a break and then hang everybody else out to dry. And we see that played in how people were defending the cops and shooting Larry, saying that Larry got what he deserved, and at the same time calling Larry a wife beater. When they don't know all the story, when they don't know all the facts. Folks, you guys who think yourselves conservative, who think yourselves Republican, who think yourselves traditional Constitution-loving people, you got to get out of the back the blue mentality. And you got to get into the back the blue until it happens to you mentality. I'm going to be sitting down with a family member of Blake's this weekend, by the way, and recording a conversation with that family member. We're going to be releasing that Monday for a special edition, the special, but for the next episode of Monday Night Musings, TC and Friends Monday Night Musings. And prior to that will be a special live stream from my local city hall from our city council meeting. And then on Wednesday of next week, we're going to be also doing a town hall meeting live stream. So my friends, fight for your freedom, it is yours. Fight for your liberty, it belongs to you. And until next time, Six Semper Tyrannis.